The smell was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't perfume, not the kind Emily usually wore, the subtle vanilla and jasmine mix that had been her signature scent for years. This was something different, musky, strong, something undeniably masculine. It wasn't cologne either, not the kind I'd ever worn. It was deeper, heavier, something that lingered in the air just a second too long. I noticed it the moment she stepped out of the car and walked past me in the kitchen. It was faint, just a trace, but enough to plant a seed of suspicion deep in my gut. She was carrying a grocery bag, acting normal, humming some song under her breath like she wasn't radiating a scent that didn't belong to her. I stood by the fridge, pretending to be occupied, but my focus was locked onto her every move, every shift of her weight, every flicker of her eyes as she set the bag down and started unpacking. "Hey, you're home early," she said, flashing a smile as she glanced at the clock. "Thought you had that late meeting today?" I did. I was supposed to be stuck in a conference room, listening to my boss drone on about quarterly reports. But I had left early, something I never did, a random decision that now felt eerily timed. I hadn't planned it. Just halfway through the meeting, I felt restless, like I needed to be somewhere else. And now, standing here in my kitchen, watching my wife pull out vegetables, eggs, and a bottle of wine, I felt like maybe my instincts had been trying to tell me something. "Got out sooner than expected," I said, stepping closer. That smell, it wasn't going away. I didn't know why it bothered me so much. People pick up scents all the time. A hug, brushing past someone, standing too close in line at a store. But this? It clung to her in a way that wasn't casual. It was embedded in the fibers of her sweater, in her hair. A scent like that doesn't just happen by accident. I reached past her for a glass from the cabinet, and as I did, I leaned in slightly, breathing in without making it obvious. There it was again. My mind ran through 1,000 possibilities, all of them colliding in a way that made my stomach tighten. Emily didn't seem to notice my pause. She pulled out a cutting board, washing the vegetables, completely at ease, like nothing was wrong. "I got that wine you like," she said, nodding toward the counter. "Thought we could have a glass tonight." I watched her hands as she chopped the tomatoes, her ring catching the light with every movement. My wife, my partner for the last 11 years, standing right in front of me, acting like she hadn't just walked into our home wearing the scent of another man. I let my gaze linger on her neck, her hair. Had she showered before coming home? No. Her hair was still in the same ponytail from this morning. That meant whatever scent was on her had been there for hours. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wanted to ask her about it, but what would I even say? "Hey, you smell like another man?" That sounded insane. It sounded paranoid. But I wasn't paranoid. "How was work?" I asked, my voice as casual as I could make it. Emily sighed. "Long, exhausting. You know how it is. Jen is still out sick, so I had to pick up the slack. And then the grocery store was packed. I swear, people act like the world's ending whenever there's a sale on chicken." She laughed, like it was just another normal day. Like she wasn't standing there lying to me. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, people are weird." I grabbed a beer from the fridge, twisting the cap off, letting the cold settle in my palm. My mind was running in circles. I wanted to drop it, let it go. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was nothing. But then she stretched her arms above her head, yawning, and for a brief second, her sleeve lifted just enough for me to see something, a faint mark on her wrist. A smudge. A shadow. Something that looked suspiciously like a bruise. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone light. "What happened to your wrist?" Emily glanced down, then quickly pulled her sleeve back down. "Oh, that?" I banged it on a shelf at work. Stupid supply closet is a mess. Too fast. The answer came too fast, too smooth, like she had it ready before I even asked. I took a slow sip of my beer, trying to process. A smell that didn't belong. A mark on her wrist. A last-minute grocery trip that seemed oddly timed. I needed to be sure. I needed something more than just suspicion. So I let it go. For now. We ate dinner like normal. She talked about work. I nodded in the right places. But the whole time, my brain was working, connecting dots I wasn't sure even existed. When she went to take a shower, I waited until I heard the water running, then I walked over to her bag. I wasn't proud of it, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. I checked the receipt from the grocery store. It was timestamped just 20 minutes before she got home. But the store was 15 minutes away, which meant she had only spent 5 minutes inside. That wasn't enough time to shop. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. There was something going on. I didn't know what yet, but I was going to find out. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. I didn't sleep much that night. Emily was curled up next to me, her breathing steady, her body warm against mine, but I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. My mind kept replaying every little detail, every inconsistency, every reason why I might be imagining things. But the smell was real. The bruise on her wrist was real. The short grocery trip that didn't add up was real. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation, but my gut wasn't buying it. I had never felt this kind of doubt before, not with her. It made me sick to my stomach. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the fan, waiting for morning to come because I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. When the alarm finally went off, Emily stirred next to me, stretching before turning to press a soft kiss to my shoulder like she always did. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. I forced a smile and ran a hand through her hair, pretending everything was normal. "Morning," I said, even though my chest felt tight. She got up and headed for the bathroom while I stayed in bed, staring at the spot she had just been in, trying to push away the anger that was creeping in. If she was lying to me, if she was doing what I thought she might be doing, then every little routine we had built together was just that, a routine. Something automatic. Something fake. I got up and went through the motions, showering, getting dressed, making coffee. Emily came into the kitchen in her robe, pouring herself a cup like she wasn't the reason my stomach was tied in knots. She checked her phone, smiling slightly before putting it down. "I have to leave a little early today," she said, grabbing a slice of toast and taking a small bite. "Meeting first thing in the morning." I leaned against the counter, watching her. "Early, huh?" "Yeah, just by 15 minutes or so. Shouldn't be a big deal." She took a sip of coffee, completely unfazed by my questioning. "Oh, and I might be home late again. There's a new project coming in, so I'll probably have to stay after and get things in order." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, even though my mind was already racing. "Makes sense. Just let me know when you're heading out, all right?" "Of course," she said, smiling like there was nothing wrong. "What are you up to today?" "Just work. Nothing exciting." I took a slow sip of my coffee, keeping my eyes on her, waiting for some crack in her act, something that would confirm what I was already suspecting. But she just finished her toast, stretched, and kissed me on the cheek before heading to the bedroom to get dressed. I listened as she moved around, opening drawers, zipping up her bag, and when she walked out, she looked different. It was subtle, but I noticed it. The way she had done her hair, the way her blouse was just a little lower cut than usual, the way she had put on perfume that wasn't her usual scent. It wasn't anything extreme, but it was enough for me to notice. I wanted to ask her why she was putting in the extra effort for a normal workday, but I knew what she'd say. She'd laugh and tell me I was being ridiculous. She'd say she just felt like looking nice today. She'd say it was nothing, but I wasn't buying it. She grabbed her keys and bag, giving me one last kiss before heading out the door. I waited exactly 10 seconds before walking to the window and watching her back out of the driveway. She turned left at the intersection, heading toward her office. At least that part was normal. But I needed more than just gut feelings. I went through my workday in a daze, barely listening to my coworkers, barely focusing on my tasks. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Emily to text, waiting for some sign that would either confirm or disprove the doubts eating away at me. Around noon, I decided I couldn't just sit around anymore. I had an hour break, so I left the office and drove to the parking lot of Emily's workplace. It wasn't something I had ever done before, and I hated that I was doing it now, but I needed to see for myself. Her car was there, parked in her usual spot. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Because now that I was sitting there, staring at the building, I realized I had no real plan. I checked the time. 12:15. If she was inside, she'd be having lunch at her desk or in the break room with her coworkers. But what if she wasn't inside? What if she had parked here and left with someone else? The thought made my hands grip the steering wheel tighter. I pulled out my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice light. "What's up?" "Nothing much. Just checking in. How's your day going?" She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Oh, the usual. Just eating lunch with Becca. How about you?" I forced a chuckle. "Same. Just grabbing something quick. Thought I'd call and say hi." "That's sweet," she said, and I could hear the sound of voices in the background, the clinking of dishes. "I have to get back soon, though. Lots to do." "Yeah, of course. I'll see you tonight?" "Yep. Love you," she said, and just like that, she was gone. I sat there, staring at the building, my heart pounding. I should have felt better after that call. I should have taken it as proof that everything was fine. But I didn't. Because I knew Emily. And I knew when she was lying. I sat in my car long after the call ended, staring at the entrance to Emily's office building, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Something about the way she spoke, the slight hesitation before answering, the way she rushed to get off the phone, it didn't sit right with me. I could hear voices in the background, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Maybe she really was with Becca. Maybe she really was just having lunch at work like she said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't. That feeling had been growing stronger with every passing day, every small inconsistency, every minor change in her behavior that she didn't think I would notice. I took a deep breath, trying to think logically. If she was lying, if she wasn't actually inside that building, then there were only a few other places she could be. I pulled up the GPS tracker I had installed on her car months ago, not because I suspected anything back then, but just for emergencies. The app showed her car exactly where I was looking at it, right in the office parking lot, which meant if she had gone anywhere, it wasn't in her own vehicle. I clenched my jaw, debating my next move. I had two options: drive away, go back to work, pretend like everything was fine, or stay and find out the truth. I didn't even have to think about it. I got out of the car and walked toward the building, my heart pounding with every step. The lobby was mostly empty except for the receptionist, a young woman with glasses who barely glanced up from her computer screen when I walked in. "Can I help you?" she asked, still typing. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I'm looking for Emily. She left her phone at home, and I wanted to drop it off for her." The receptionist finally looked up, giving me a polite but tired smile. "Emily who?" "Emily Carter." Her smile faltered just slightly. "Oh, I think she stepped out for lunch." My stomach twisted. "Stepped out?" "Yeah, she and Becca left about 20 minutes ago," she said, tapping her fingers on the desk. "I'm not sure where they went, though." I forced a small laugh, nodding like it was no big deal, even though my pulse was hammering in my ears. "Got it. Thanks. I'll just leave her phone in her office." The receptionist hesitated for a second before shaking her head. "Actually, I don't think that's a good idea. She doesn't like people in her office when she's not there." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was boiling. Emily had never been weird about her office before. I had visited her plenty of times, brought her lunch, picked her up after work. Now suddenly, I wasn't allowed to walk in? "No problem," I said smoothly. "I'll just text her and let her know I stopped by." The receptionist nodded, already back to typing, and I turned on my heel, walking out of the building with my fists clenched at my sides. She wasn't here. She had left. And yet, she had told me over the phone that she was sitting with Becca, having lunch. Why lie about something so small? Because it wasn't small. It was one more brick in the wall she was building between us. I got back into my car, checking the time. It had been about 25 minutes since she supposedly left with Becca, which meant if I was going to catch her, I had to move fast. I drove through the nearby streets, scanning every restaurant, every cafe, anywhere she might have gone. There were dozens of places she could be, but I didn't even know if I was looking in the right area. Then, just as I was about to give up, I saw it. Emily's reflection in the window of a small Italian restaurant, sitting in a booth near the back. She wasn't alone. And she wasn't with Becca. I slowed the car, pulling into a parking space across the street. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I watched her. She was leaning forward slightly, her expression relaxed, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. The man sitting across from her was talking, gesturing with his hands, and she was laughing, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her water glass. I felt something inside me snap. She had lied to me. Straight to my face, without hesitation, without guilt. She had looked me in the eye this morning and told me she was swamped at work, told me she had meetings all day, told me she'd be home late. And here she was, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant in the middle of the day with a man I had never seen before, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. I wanted to march in there, flip the table, demand an explanation, but I forced myself to stay put. I needed to be smart. I needed to be sure. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was just lunch. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I watched for a few more minutes, studying every interaction, every detail. The way she touched her hair, the way she leaned in just a little too close, the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. And then I saw it, his hand reaching across the table, resting lightly on hers. And she didn't pull away. I exhaled slowly, forcing the rage back down. This wasn't the time to confront her. I needed more than just what I saw through a restaurant window. I needed undeniable proof. So I took out my phone, snapped a few photos, and waited. I sat in my car, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned pale, my eyes fixed on the screen as I scrolled through the pictures I had just taken. There was no mistaking what I was seeing. Emily, sitting in that restaurant with a man I had never seen before, laughing, smiling, completely at ease as if nothing in the world could touch her. Her hand resting under his, her eyes locked on his face in a way that made my stomach turn. This wasn't a casual lunch between coworkers. This wasn't an innocent meeting. This was something else entirely. Something I had never thought I would have to face. I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe, to think about my next move. My instinct was screaming at me to storm into that restaurant, to demand an explanation, to call her out right then and there in front of everyone. But that would be reckless, and I wasn't about to let my emotions take over. If she was lying to me, if she was doing what I thought she was doing, I needed to be smart. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. I watched as the man leaned in slightly, saying something that made Emily laugh again. Her hand moved, fingers grazing the back of his as if it was the most natural thing in the world. My pulse hammered in my ears, and it took everything in me to stay in my seat. I needed more. A few photos weren't enough. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and got out of the car. I crossed the street casually, keeping my eyes ahead, not wanting to draw attention to myself. The restaurant had large windows, and from where I was standing, I had a clear view inside. I walked past slowly, catching bits and pieces of their conversation through the slight gap in the open window. Emily's voice was lighter than I had heard in weeks, almost playful. "I really needed this," she was saying, stirring her drink with her straw, smiling at him. "Work has been exhausting lately. You should take more breaks," the man replied, his voice smooth, confident. "You work too hard." Emily rolled her eyes but smiled. "Tell that to my boss. He's got me drowning in projects." "Your boss sounds like a real pain," the man said with a grin. "You have no idea," Emily sighed, sipping her drink. "But at least I have something to look forward to." The way she said it, the way her voice softened at the end, made my blood run cold. I knew that tone. It was the way she used to talk to me when we were first dating, when everything was new and exciting. I clenched my jaw, feeling my fingers tighten around my phone. Then, as if to confirm everything I had feared, the man reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and slid it across the table toward her. "Tomorrow?" he asked. Emily hesitated for half a second before taking the key and slipping it into her purse. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, nodding. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I didn't need to hear anything else. I turned away and walked back to my car, my entire body tense with barely restrained fury. There was no longer any doubt. No more wondering. No more second-guessing. Emily was lying to me. She wasn't just having lunch with a coworker. She wasn't just stressed from work. She was planning something that involved a key that wasn't ours, something she didn't want me to know about. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. I needed to know where she was going tomorrow. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I pulled out my phone and checked the GPS tracker again. If she used her car, I would know exactly where she went. But if she got into his, I would have to follow her myself. I took another deep breath, trying to steady my hands. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed to see just how deep this went. I needed to be absolutely sure before I decided my next move. I started the car, pulled out of the parking spot, and drove away without looking back. I barely remembered the drive home, my mind so clouded with anger and disbelief that everything outside my car window blurred into meaningless shapes. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too hard, and my jaw was clenched so tightly it felt like my teeth might crack. The moment I stepped inside, I tossed my keys onto the counter and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the photos I had taken. Emily's smile, the way she leaned in toward that man, the way she had taken the key without hesitation. It all played back in my head like a movie I couldn't turn off. There was no question about what I had seen. She had lied. She had planned this. But I needed to know where she was going with that key. I had a choice to make. I could wait until she got home and confront her with the pictures, demand an explanation, watch her scramble for excuses, or I could wait for tomorrow, follow her, and catch her in the act. I had always thought if something like this ever happened to me, I would lose control, start yelling, flip a table, do something dramatic like in the movies. But instead, I felt cold, like my emotions had shut down, leaving only the need for answers. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. I needed undeniable proof. When Emily came home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, set her bag down, and stretched like she had just finished the longest workday of her life. God, today was exhausting, she sighed, kicking off her heels. I swear, I don't know how much more of this job I can take. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of guilt, but she was calm, too calm. She walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. "How was your day?" she asked, completely unaware that I had spent the afternoon watching her betray me. I forced myself to answer, keeping my voice even. "Same as usual. Nothing special." She nodded, taking a sip of water. "Well, at least one of us had a normal day." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, at how she could stand there, feet away from me, and lie so effortlessly. I wanted to tell her I knew, that I had seen everything, but I kept my mouth shut. Tomorrow, I would have everything I needed. That night, I barely slept. Emily was right beside me, her breathing slow and steady, while I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind running through every possible scenario. Where was she going tomorrow? A hotel? His apartment? A secret place they had been using for who knows how long? I felt my stomach twist at the thought of her with him, of her doing things she used to do with me, of her looking at him the way she used to look at me. But I shoved those thoughts aside. I couldn't afford to think like that yet. Morning came painfully slow. Emily got ready like usual, moving around the house with the same routine she had followed for years. Shower, coffee, makeup, checking her phone between sips, texting someone she had probably saved under a fake name. I sat at the table, watching her, waiting for her to slip up, to show even the smallest hint of nervousness, but she didn't. "I'll probably be home late again," she said as she grabbed her keys. "This project is killing me." I forced a nod, keeping my face neutral. "No problem. Just let me know." She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out the door. I gave her a 5-minute head start before grabbing my keys and following. She drove normally, no hesitation, no signs that she was second-guessing what she was about to do. I stayed a few cars behind, careful not to get too close. My heart pounded every time she changed lanes, every time she slowed down, but she never once looked in her rearview mirror. Either she was too confident, or she had done this so many times that she didn't think she needed to check. After 20 minutes, she turned into a small apartment complex. I pulled into a lot across the street, watching as she parked and stepped out of the car. She walked up the stairs to the second floor, pulled out the key, and let herself into one of the units. I stared at the door she had just disappeared behind, my entire body tense. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I took out my phone, snapped a picture of the apartment number, and waited. I sat in my car, gripping my phone, staring at the picture of the apartment door Emily had just walked through. My pulse was steady now, the initial shock settling into something colder, something more controlled. I had my proof. There was no more guessing, no more questioning whether I was imagining things. She had used the key, walked inside like she belonged there, like this was something normal, something she had done before. I checked the time. If this was some quick secret meeting, she wouldn't be long. If it was more than that, if this was something serious, she'd stay, and I'd have my answer about just how deep this betrayal ran. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. 30. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I watched the window of the apartment, waiting for any sign of movement. I didn't know what I expected to see: curtains shifting, shadows moving, anything that would confirm what I already knew. The thought of her inside with him, laughing, touching, doing things she had sworn belonged to us, made my stomach turn. I had never felt anger like this before. It wasn't a quick burst, not something that would fade in a few hours. This was something else, something that sat heavy in my chest, something that made my fingers itch to do something, anything, to make sure she felt even a fraction of what I was feeling. At the 45-minute mark, I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit in my car like some pathetic fool while my wife had her fun in another man's bed. I got out, crossed the street, and walked up the stairs. Every step felt heavier than the last, but my mind was clear, my body steady. I reached the door, raised my fist, and knocked. Firm, deliberate. There was no way she wouldn't hear it. Silence. Then, after a few seconds, I heard shuffling, movement just beyond the door. Someone was there. Someone was deciding what to do next. I knocked again, louder this time. The door cracked open just slightly, and I saw him. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing nothing but a pair of sweatpants, like he had just rolled out of bed. His eyes flickered with surprise for only a second before settling into something more guarded, like he already knew who I was and why I was here. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm, too calm. I kept my expression blank. "Yeah, you can get my wife." His jaw tightened just a little. "I think you have the wrong place." I let out a slow breath, forcing down the immediate urge to push past him. "I watched her walk in here 45 minutes ago. She used a key. Now, either you go get her, or I will." He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I knew everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This was something established, something he thought he could protect. Then, behind him, I heard her voice. "Who is it?" She wasn't panicked. She wasn't rushing to explain, to hide. She sounded normal, like she was asking about a package delivery, like she wasn't expecting me at all. I clenched my fists. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" I said, keeping my voice even. His lips pressed together for a brief second before he stepped back, opening the door just enough for me to see inside. And there she was, Emily, standing in the middle of the apartment in an oversized t-shirt, her hair slightly messy like she had just gotten comfortable, like this was home. And the second she saw me, her entire face changed. The confidence drained out of her, replaced by something else, something closer to fear. "Danny," she breathed, as if saying my name would somehow make this better, as if there was a single word she could say that would erase what she had done. I stared at her, waiting for the excuses to start, for the apologies, for the desperate attempt to rewrite reality. But she didn't say anything else. She just stood there, mouth slightly open, frozen, caught. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't go home right away. I drove, not really caring where, as long as it was away from that apartment, away from Emily and the man she had built her little secret world with. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even, but my mind was working faster than it ever had before. I could still see her standing there, frozen, guilty, caught in a lie she hadn't even had time to spin. I could still hear the way she had said my name, soft, almost pleading, like she had been trying to buy herself time to come up with some excuse that would make this less than what it was. But there was no excuse. There was no misunderstanding. And I wasn't about to let her walk away from this without consequences. I pulled into a parking lot, turned off the car, and sat in silence. Confronting her had been just the first step. She deserved worse. Much worse. I wasn't the kind of man to scream, throw things, make a scene, but I knew how to hit where it hurt. Emily had spent years building up the perfect image, a devoted wife, a hard-working professional, someone people trusted and respected. I was going to rip all of that away from her. I started with the pictures. The ones I had taken outside the restaurant, the ones of her walking into that apartment, the time-stamped GPS logs from her car, proving where she had been. I collected everything into a neat little folder, then I made copies. One went to my email, one to a USB drive, one to my lawyer, just in case she tried to fight dirty in the divorce. I wasn't going to give her the chance. Next, I made a call. "Hey, man," I said as soon as Brian picked up. "I need a favor." Brian had been my best friend for years, the kind of guy who had always had my back no matter what. He also happened to work in Emily's company, just a couple of floors down from her. If there was anyone who could make sure word got around, it was him. "Yeah," he asked, already picking up on the tone in my voice. "What's going on?" "Emily's been screwing around," I said bluntly. "I have proof, and I want everyone to know." There was a pause, then a low whistle. "Who's the guy?" "Not sure yet. But she's been meeting him during work hours, sneaking around, lying. And I need people to see her for who she really is." Brian didn't even hesitate. "Say no more. Consider it done." I ended the call and checked the time. Emily would still be at that apartment, probably trying to figure out what to do next, maybe even panicking now that she realized I wasn't just going to let this slide. That was fine. Let her sweat. When I finally went home, I didn't bother pretending everything was normal. I packed my things, only what I needed, nothing more. Clothes, important documents, the essentials. I had no intention of staying in a house that had been nothing but a lie. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, right next to a printed copy of one of the pictures of her and her new boyfriend at the restaurant. No note. No explanation. She didn't deserve one. She called me 3 times that night. I didn't answer. The messages started after that. "Danny, please talk to me. Let me explain. I made a mistake. I don't want to lose you. Where are you? Come home. We can fix this." I read them all, then deleted them without responding. By the next morning, the fallout had already started. Brian worked fast. Emily's coworkers knew. Her boss knew. The company's HR department knew. By noon, she had been called in for a private discussion about inappropriate behavior during work hours. And by the time I met with my lawyer that afternoon, she had already been put on suspension pending further review. It wasn't enough. Not yet. The final blow came when I sent the pictures and my divorce notice to her parents. They had always thought she was perfect, untouchable, someone who could do no wrong. I made sure they saw the truth. That night, she called again. I let it ring, then finally picked up. "Danny, please," she said, her voice shaking. "Can we talk? Just us. No fighting, no yelling. Just talk." I took a deep breath, steadying myself before answering. "Talk about what, Emily? About how you lied to me. About how you snuck around behind my back like I was too stupid to notice." She faltered. "I messed up. I know I did. But I never wanted to lose you. I never meant for this to happen." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You didn't mean for this to happen? Emily, you took a key. You walked into another man's apartment like it was yours. That doesn't just happen. That's a choice. And you made it over and over again." She was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she whispered, "Is this it? Are we really done?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, Emily. We're done." I hung up. She tried a few more times after that, sending messages, calling, even showing up at Brian's place when she realized I was staying with him for a while. I never answered. I never let her in. 2 weeks later, she lost her job. A month later, our divorce papers were signed. And just like that, everything she had built, everything she had thrown away for some cheap thrill, was gone. I moved on, found my own place, started over. And Emily? She got exactly what she deserved.